Okay, so video 2 for this week on Facebook, and what I want to get into in video 2, okay, I've set up the stage now. Facebook is this monolithic global in size and scope and just all-controlling behemoth. And you must have got an inkling that I don't think this is a good idea, and it's not just me. It's lots of other people who don't think it's a good idea as well. I think you get into now why that's a bad idea here, right? And so I think this has been incredibly well articulated by this gentleman, Tim Berners-Lee, who is an incredibly important character in the history of digital media in general. Tim Berners-Lee is effectively, if you want to say, the inventor of the World Wide Web. Not the internet, but the World Wide Web. And the World Wide Web is important because it was the first system that allowed us to share different types of communication aside from text online. So sharing images and video and so on, the World Wide Web and the protocols of the World Wide Web allowed that to be possible. Now, in 2018, Tim Berners-Lee claimed that the web itself is under threat from misinformation, questionable practices of political advertising, a loss of control over personal information, and the weaponization of the web by companies like Facebook. And that's a very serious term, right? Weaponization. Facebook are transforming the web into a weapon to be used. And it's good to understand what Berners-Lee means by this. Why is it a weapon, and who's it being used against? You know, if Facebook is turning the World Wide Web into a giant knife, who's it going to stick with it, you know? So by weaponization, Berners-Lee is referring to the use of data harvested and analyzed by Facebook and others and then deployed as tools for political gain, such as the Facebook data breach used by Cambridge Analytica to target and manipulate Facebook users in the US presidential election of 2016 and the UK Brexit vote of 2016. So the algorithms at work on the Facebook platform trawl through the interactions and activities of users on the platform to gather sensitive personal information about sexual orientation, race, gender, intelligence, and even childhood trauma, mining and refining the digital hot oil, key term from this video, of the digital economy. This results can be used to target users, and that's where the weaponization bit comes from, right? Using the machinations of platforms like Facebook to target specific users with tailored information that play on psychological and personal profile in order to tempt users to take particular courses of action. And I think, damn, it's not weaponization in perhaps the way that we were thinking, but it is. The consequences of such actions are profound and serious. If one can master working with these systems, one can target people at will in order to convince them to act in particular ways for your benefit. That's pretty important. So at root, Tim Berners-Lee's concerns are around the polarization of the web and the dominance of a few companies in a medium that was designed for and bloomed through an environment of universal usage and access. When the web started in the 1990s, it was seen as the Wild West of communication, and you know, anything and anybody could set something up on the World Wide Web, have traffic. You know, it would be a democratization of media away from the giant corporations that ran media prior to the web, you know, giant television corporations, giant cinema conglomerates, etc. In the intervening period of 25 years, really, since the boom of the World Wide Web in '95, we've actually seen just another set of conglomerates appear and dominate. So if you like, the pluses of the web, what we thought would be good things about the web, just haven't happened, and instead we've seen a repeat of the mistakes of the past. So as Jaron Lanier argues, the digital world has become remarkably consolidated. It wasn't supposed to be this way, but it has become this way. While the World Wide Web is often portrayed as a great wilderness, teeming mysterious activities, is actually mostly supervised by a very small number of companies, and the dominance of these companies has afforded them the opportunity to become vast data aggregators with the potential to disrupt and be disrupted in the context of wider society. So without monopolistic positions in search and data organization, for example, Google or social networking or operating systems, these companies would not exist in the scale that they do. The web and networked activity is dominated by a few companies. And when we talk about social media, we are talking about the dominance of Facebook. You know, two of the very biggest platforms available for social networking, two of the platforms that dominate our time, dominate our attention, are controlled by one company. And that in itself is deeply problematic. There is Jaron Lanier playing some kind of really weird instrument, but I love it. Jaron Lanier argues that the information economy that we are building at that time in 2014, and which we continue to build today, does not embrace capitalism as an economic system of participation, but rather a new form of feudalism, where users are farmed for data and their interactions with one another become the foundation of a new data economy. We are simply the feudal slaves of the imperial overlords of these companies, to which we do all our daily lives and conduct our lives through in order to provide the owners of these companies with more and more data to harvest in order for more and more money to be made. Lanier doesn't think this is a good thing, and I happen to agree with him. This notion of the audience as a commodity to be sold is not a new thing. This has been around, as I say in this slide, since 1976. But companies like Facebook organize data from users for the benefit of remote clients who want to manipulate what is presented to those people over those very networks. What Lanier is outlining here is that this weaponization of the web means that we are harvested as individuals. That information is then sold to advertisers, and then those advertisers alter the very conditions of our existence online in order to make us more efficient consumers of the products that they have paid Facebook to advertise to them. So Facebook, in conjunction with its customers, the companies, are manipulating the way that we see the world itself through our news feeds and so on, in order to be more efficient customers of those companies. Lanier doesn't see this as a good thing, and again, I agree with him. The result of this is that the process of capital accumulation itself in corporate digital media platforms is targeted advertising dictated by user activity. The role of the media in the past has been to control and harness audience power to produce a commodity that can be produced, sold and consumed. And Smythe was writing about this in the 1970s. He was talking about the construction of audience by television, newspapers, etc., which, although powerful, was a much less sophisticated means of doing things. For example, the BBC, I can't use the BBC because they didn't sell advertising, right? ITV knew how many people were watching its programs, roughly speaking, but they didn't know the specific needs and desires of each individual member of that audience. Facebook does. That's how granular that kind of notion of audience here, in terms of audience being sold, has become. Advertisers, in effect, are buying attention as a product from platforms committed to the monopolization of attention, according to Tim Wu. So the difference between old media and digital media is that attention can be quantified, and it can be quantified closely and very, very specifically, in a way that wasn't possible in the time that Dallas Smythe was writing about the audience commodity in the 1970s. The weaponization here is a weaponization of our attention. Companies are going to war with our sense of what we know and what we want to see, and controlling that in order to make us more likely to buy their products. So audience Facebook style, if we're thinking about it in those terms, is the platforms of digital media allow for the storage and analysis of all interactions on any platform. Every search, every like, every message, every click-through can be saved and added to the churn of data about you as an individual, creating a data subject which becomes more important than the individual themselves. The data subject itself becomes the commodity which is traded, and eventually becomes us ourselves. Everything we do online is in light of the data subject that has been constructed by us from our constant interactions with digital media. So when we think about what Facebook does, this is what it's doing. It's old-fashioned exploitation with new means. Online advertising has been seen as a mechanism by which Facebook exploits users as users become a commodity. And Web 2.0 in general has been seen as based on the exploitation of free labor since its emergence in the early part of the 2000s. But Facebook has perfected exploitation. It is a perfect exploitative system. Billions of users, grateful for having a free service, conduct massive parts of their lives on a network that then harvests all that information in order to sell things specifically to them based on thousands and thousands of data points, which make a very exact picture of what these people want. Under the conditions of use of the platform, most users become part of a creative, precarious underclass of labourers whose work is dictated by and for the benefit of the platform that they use. We are working to pay Mark Zuckerberg his money. And the man earns a lot of money, and it is our work on his platform, be that Facebook, be that WhatsApp, be that Insta, that is paying. This, my friends, that accumulation of data is digital oil. The oil of the digital economy is your data. Facebook is one of the most successful companies in the world because it is a highly refined set of procedures for harvesting data from users. It is data rich, and therefore it is rich. And it is, if you want to extend that oil metaphor further, Facebook has got a shit ton of oil. Okay, it's got more oil than anyone else because it has perfected the way that it can grab not just from its own platforms but from across the web in order to bring as much data in as possible, in order to refine data profiles in order to make it the best in the business at this highly questionable business. So Facebook creates what we call data subjects. A data subject is an object or a person, if you like, but really it's an abstraction from a person that a set of data refers to. And Facebook creates data subjects as soon as they join the site, or they join Instagram or WhatsApp, or indeed as soon as we have a fixed IP address on something. And the continual production, processing and sale of data from data subjects involves tracking their every use of Facebook and every other website. We are continually tracked and surveilled when we are using digital media in order to create a more and more efficient data subject. And again, here's the point. Well, I haven't even got Facebook installed on my phone. You're bound to have one app on your phone that's harvesting all this information and selling it to Facebook, because most of them do. They're all in it together. Okay. Criticisms of this model, as you can expect, there are many. Evgeny Morozov, whose criticisms really are 10 years old now, but are still really, really pertinent. He crystallizes these criticisms, and I don't think there are many better summaries of this since. Maybe, of course, Shoshana Zuboff, who I'll talk about further, but optimism around social media is based on the techno-deterministic ideologies of cyber-utopianism. Stuff that only postulate advantages for businesses and society through the lens of that industry, and the benefits of that industry without taking into account the realities of exploitations and the contradictions of capitalism. What is Morozov actually saying here? Social media is seen as a good, but that's a techno-deterministic and cyber-utopian view. Actually, when we look at it rationally, you are talking about mass exploitation. And the contradictions of capitalism here, referring to the Marxist sense of the term, is that we have very few people at the top of the system here who are earning any money from social media. Even those who use platforms to earn money themselves, like influencers, are earning far less than the people in charge of them. They are exploited too, or to a greater or lesser extent. Jose van Dijk sees that social media achieves this through an automation of the social by engineering and manipulating social connections themselves. When we do everything through social networks, when we organize our lives and stipulate our social relations through these networks, we are being automated in particular ways. And Douglas Rushkoff argues that this is a result of the social media is involved in a process of optimizing humans for machinery. The machinery is there, the data harvesting and processing materials are there. Basically, the social media itself just organizes us in particular ways to make us optimal for that. Foose summarizes why this is so problematic. Facebook is a company controlled by private shareholders who own the platform and own a number of other platforms, as I've already said. Facebook's users create data whenever they're online. This data is sold to Facebook's advertising clients, who are enabled to present targeted advertisements on users' profiles. So without Facebook users, there's no profit. Without us, it doesn't exist. So users create the monetary value and profit of Facebook, but they don't own this profit. So that goes straight to the shareholders. So everything we do, we don't get anything from. Facebook users are therefore exploited. Indeed, social media prosumers are double objects of commodification. They're commodities themselves, and through this commodification, their consciousness, as embodied through their activity, becomes, while online, permanently exposed to commodity logic in the form of advertisements. It's a long section at the end there, but it's very, very important. Social media prosumers are double objects of commodification. They are commodities themselves. What does that mean? It means even those who use social media to produce content themselves and get something from it are commodities. They are commodities which are actually more value to the platforms themselves than Joe Schmoes like me, who don't earn them anything. We are always in this double system of commodification. We are producing content which commodifies, and our activity always becomes a commodity itself. So anything we do, even if we don't produce anything, we are still a commodity to be sold. Well, that's kind of rough. Let's see where part 3 goes. Maybe it'll be uplifting. Who can tell? You will have to tune in to find out.